This defensive line, I don't know if you had a specific comment that you wanted to take from Elko or any of the players, but kind of what are your thoughts coming out of these SEC media days, or a specific comment on where this defensive line group is going to be going into this first game at UTS or against UTSA?
Well, I think it's the expectation. So I think that he did reference obviously DJ Hicks having to having to have his best season because he is a junior. This is his third year. This is his second year as a starter. He's certainly proven that he's one of the strongest, more athletic defensive tackle prospects coming out. Obviously, he was kind of buried on the depth chart a little bit during his first two seasons. But this is his shot. This is his shot to really show off. I was a 5-star prospect for a reason. I'm now the guy, sharing that title, right, because of the new addition of Tyler Odienem from Iowa State, who's one of the more versatile defensive linemen who could, played in a 3-4 system, so he can really play strong in defensive end, and he can play defensive tackle. He's going to really switch at that 3-tech position. He's going to rotate in. And the other name that Elko did praise on Monday during Coach's Night was Albert Regis. And I don't know if we talked about Albert Regis that much on the show, but this is another guy where, again, I think he had 6 pass deflections last year and 34 tackles as a defensive lineman. Elko loves this guy. And
right.
This was a praise. This was incredible leader, extremely talented. And again, he's talking about a 300-pound defensive tackle who's a redshirt senior, right? And it wasn't a name throughout the offseason because of DJ Hicks' recruiting status. We talked more about that because you just have heightened expectations because he was, referencing like Brandon Arrington. He was kind of that guy for the defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Right? Is, two programs are vying, almost went to the other, chose A&M, and it's like, whoa, that's a huge win for A&M. But because of all those guys in front of him, he just hasn't flashed consistently. But now I think this opens things up for him to be that man mover, to be a really consistent run defender, and to put some pressure on the interior and push that quarterback back, right? Because he is a freak of nature. We've seen him in the weight room. I don't expect him to have a drop off. I just expect him to improve, whether it's significantly or moderately, right? But I just think that in the 3 edge edition, so I do love it. Dayon Hayes, very active on social media. Torin York did reference that one of the reporters asked, and if I was there, I would ask this question too, because I'm very intrigued by Dayon Hayes. Who's the player that stood out the most? He said Dayon Hayes. Dayon Hayes, again, because of his injury issues in the past, he played at Pitt for about 2 to 3 years, played at Colorado, but again, had a lot of injury problems. But this is a great pass rusher. This is something
Colorado took him for they needed this guy when Dion went into the portal hard for their team. I mean, this is a guy they pegged from the start. We're like, we need this guy. The injuries riddled him.
Yeah. And that's the thing, because when we watched the spring game, and I remember you and I think went over it and discussed it. It's so long ago now, but he was one of the guys who stood out. And granted, this was against A&M's backup offensive line, but the strength, the technique, the guy knows what he's doing, right? So if you have, and to add to that, TJ Searcy from Florida has been a guy who I think is going to add a lot to the run defense. I don't know if he's going to be one of their better pass rushers. That wasn't really his thing at Florida, but he has the length definitely to be a guy off the edge that you can fear. And then Samuel Mpemba, thank you. I always want to screw these guys' names up. Is another guy they're not really talking about too much, and that just has to do with his standing at Georgia. He was a former, I think, 4 or 5-star prospect.
He was a borderline 5-star prospect.
Borderline 5-star, yeah, and again buried on the depth chart of Georgia. Just felt that because of the guys leaving at Texas A&M, he probably had a chance to see the field more. That's very true. I think that he's a guy I really want to hear about next week or the week after, because we haven't really heard a ton about him. That's why it was nice to hear about Dayon Hayes is standing out, because you're hearing about the core guys, and that's going to always be the case, because that's why you bring them to SC Media Days, because they represent those positions. So that's always great. And we can, our Marjorie Adams on the O-line, really talking about we're trying to get that maroon goon vibe back. That's what we believe we can be. And that's that 2020 offensive line that just destroyed guys in front of them. That's what they feel like they can be. And this pass rush, one of the reasons Torrey York wants this pass rush to work, make his job easier. He wants to stop the run, cover a tight end when he has to, but that's going to make the guy, if you got guys just pushing the pocket and getting the quarterback and chasing him out, having to make plays out of structure, that makes your job easier. And that makes the football play better. And it's just, I love that player perspectives are always about guys that nobody's thinking about because they're seeing something we're not seeing on the field yet. And another name that I would say on the defensive line that you're going to hear a lot about is Marco Jones. So that's the freshman defensive end edge who I believe he had 4 sacks in the spring game, 5. Yeah. So, but again, not somebody we've talked about a ton because he's a freshman. But I would not be surprised if he saw time early just to kind of see what he's made of, go against, a starting offensive tackle at college and see what you're made of. Are you really that from your pass rusher?
Yeah. And you outlined it. And not only is it easy, like you said, but it also makes it more fun to watch on the field, right? Like if they are able to key in on these QBs 3-step dropping back, but are they able to kind of put up the numbers that A&M wanted when they brought in Nick Skirton, when they wanted these jumps from Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, and you saw how highly they got drafted because of those intangibles. So I thought it was really fun to see the trend that they went into the portal this last year and they went about it the exact same way they recruited the defensive side of the ball as well that last year out of high school, and where they took the guys like a Samuel Mpemba, a borderline 5-star recruit from his class, a TJ Searcy who has the length and the size already at Florida. They just wanted to see it on the field. They took these guys because of their intangibles. You take the athlete, you get them on campus, and you let them thrive from there.
Yeah, and you have the coaches to do it. We talked about obviously Mike Echo taking over as defensive play caller. That is very significant because he's going to really figure out what I need to use at certain times in the game, when I need to put fresh bodies in there in third down situations. Who is the guy I'm going to key in on? Obviously Cassius Howe and Riley Kennedy are 2 names that, a ton of praise from us. They've been mentioned a couple times. Obviously, I think that's just expectations, though, right? I think that they expect both those guys to lead A&M in several categories. It's the guys you don't really know a ton about that Elko has talked about, and that's what makes him a great orator right now, is that he's really informing this fan base and everybody. Look, we've got a lot of talent outside of those players, so those guys are going to be great. But these are the guys that you need to start watching, especially this fall, because they're going to start to flash. And that's just going to prove that we are one of the deepest rosters in the SEC. And that when you go into the transfer portal, you're not just trying to get bodies. You're trying to get guys who you feel are great additions in terms of fit and mentality. And if they fit that mold, then you're going to have the success that the Texas Longhorns had last year with a couple guys who ended up going to the NFL out of the transfer portal. So it's always hard because you just don't know, especially, offensively, Casey Concepcion. I'm going to get to him in a minute. But having a guy like that with an elite skill set, especially after the catch, and somebody who can separate in coverage, it automatically makes your offense better. That's what you're trying to go after in the transfer portal. So when you look at all the pass rushers they got, you felt that Searcy was going to help in run defense specifically and bring you some pass rush. You thought that Deion Hayes could be one of your better pass rushers. And you thought that Mpemba is just a rising player, right? Somebody who, in the right scheme and using him correctly, he could thrive as well. So it wasn't just, former 5-star guy, come on in. That's not how it works. It was the same with Des Ricks, is that you've been studying him for a while. You watched him at Alabama. You watched him in high school. You tried to recruit him. And you've always known this could be a very, very good player. He's going to have hiccups early, but if we have the right coaches in here, like a Lyle Hemphill, having Jay Bateman in a more coaching role, not a play calling role, and obviously Jordan Peterson, who we could talk about all day, and Ishmael Aristide, who've done a fantastic job on the recruiting trail, also notably great coaches and developers, you're going to finally have a group that is confident and playing very confidently and not having those, oh crap, I have to see the field against this guy, allowing chunk plays and looking lost. And that's the thing they killed them last year, is that you saw the losses they had, that defense looked lost. And I think that's what Elko was addressing all offseason. It wasn't just, we got to get better in A, B, and C. It's like, we cannot have games where we got guys looking at Lenora Sellers running for 30 yards for a touchdown, bulldozing a safety, and then looking around going, what the hell just happened? Can't have that. You cannot have that. You have that, 8-4. That's all I'm going to say.
Right? The story of how it goes.
Yeah, and that's every team. That's not just A&M, but that's every team. And that's why he feels that the defense is even more important to improve because, and we're going to transition to this now, quarterback play, obviously. We're going to kind of end the show with that. But The Athletic, and I don't have the list in front of me, but The Athletic ranked the top quarterbacks heading into the top college quarterbacks heading into the 2020 season. They did it by tiers. So it was like top 30, top 40 or something like that. And you had, I think Gary Nussmeier and Kate Klubnik were either 1 and 2. And then you really got down the list where we discussed pre-show former Texas A&M quarterback Haynes King. I think he was like in top 15 or something. And then you had a couple guys, Fernando Mendoza, who transferred from Cal, Darren Messiah, who is the quarterback for Duke, who's really a hot name. So a couple, and then there were some guys in between that, like Dante Moore from Oregon was ranked higher than Marcel Reed, which I understand that. I think he's an elite prospect and somebody who has high NFL potential. And I'm not going to. And Taylor Green was also ranked higher, Arkansas quarterback. Look, I can understand that too. We've used that term a lot, freak of nature. He's one of those freaks of nature, just very tall. I think he's like 6'5". He runs like a gazelle, and he's got a huge arm. And he's somebody who in Bobby Petrino's offense could have a Heisman-like year if he had the type of weapons around him and he became that like full version of himself.
Yeah, he's someone that I look at and I know we're stressed on time, but I've heard whispers of like if he has a good season, he has a lot of like NFL scouting types kind of looking already his way on like, hey, if you take a jump, there could be some teams calling you up this next time to come draft.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So there are some of those guys. I would dispute Haynes King because I don't think he's a good passer. I think he's more just a tough-nosed football player. If he really wants to play in the NFL, he's going to have to really show that his throwing mechanics have improved and show he has arm talent this season instead of just kind of running and getting beat up. That's probably not the greatest thing for his NFL future. But look, I love that kid. He's a tough player. He's fun to watch. But in terms of quarterback rankings, it's just I always have a hard time when you start to put like good players, just good overall players high up instead of like if you're doing a player ranking for college football watchability. Yeah, Haynes King's like number 5 in my opinion, right? He's like top there. Like if you want to watch great college football, watch Georgia Tech because that puts it on the field every year. But
if you want football, you look at Haynes King and you go, that's a football guy.
Yeah, exactly. And that if you're doing quarterback and you're talking about throwing mechanics, you're talking about NFL ability, you're talking about all that kind of stuff. Having Marcel Reed, who came in at number 26, look, it was just very confusing to me. And I think it just has to do with that bias with A&M, with the national media. And I know this for a fact, does not watch every A&M game. They will watch, I will tell you, this season, and you could ask any A&M reporter, whether it's me or anybody else, they will watch Notre Dame. They may watch the first game because Texas fans will definitely watch first games. They think they want UTSA to beat Texas A&M. But they will watch Notre Dame. They will watch maybe Auburn. They will watch LSU. And they will watch Texas. And now everybody will watch Texas because that's one of the bigger games of the year. But that's it. And if you do that, you do not get a good scope on this team at all. And if you only watched like 2 games last year, you have no idea who A&M was, right? You could talk about like they had these deficiencies. And, I saw there was an ESPN article talking about one of the questions with their team was wide receiver. And I'm kind of reading, I'm like, wait, what? That's what you're worried about? Because I don't get that at all because I would have said cornerback. We just spent 20 minutes talking about unknowns in secondary, right? You can easily put that, but wide receiver, I think we can both agree they upgraded tremendously this offseason. You get Casey Concepcion, you get Mario Craver, you get Terry Bussey coming back, and you have Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel-Roman, who both look like very, very good players with a ton of speed and separation skills. And if you know Colin Klein's offense, that fits perfectly to what he runs. So
100% it does.
And again, what does that do for Marcel Reed, who, if you're ranked 26, that means they don't believe in you in one aspect. That's his throw game, right? They don't believe that he's a great passer. They have not seen him throw balls like DJ Lagway, who we talked pre-show that DJ Lagway, who we believe is probably a better overall quarterback prospect just because of the arm talent. He's got a huge arm. He's got some accuracy issues. He's got to work those out. Obviously, he's going to be the guy in Florida and be relied on the same way, more than Marcel Reed will be, because I don't think his team is as good as A&M's is offensively. And even though I think they do have one of the better offensive lines as well, but he'll be asked to do a lot more, right? So he'll be judged a little more harshly. Whereas Marcel Reed just needs to do enough, right? He just needs to really move this offense forward, which means hit your quick passes. Hope that, you want guys like Concepcion and Mario Craver to get those yak yards, right? Those rack yards, and get those big games. And then that just makes it easier because you want that balanced run game. You want to hit your guys when they're open. And you're going to take the deep shot every once in a while. We talked about 5-star signing Jerome Miles, who Billy Lucci of Texags, who I'd love to have on the show one day to discuss this team. Maybe we can do that in the fall. But he was talking about what he's been hearing from camp, that Jerome Miles, who's coming off of a knee injury during the beginning of his, which is actually good for him. It was the beginning of his senior year, is really standing out so far. And I mean, if you got Jerome Miles standing out and you got all these other guys we just mentioned, maybe that's going to be your Noah Thomas type of replacement because Jerome Miles is one of the bigger receivers on this team, could be a red zone threat and very, very fast for a guy his size. So he's got all the options available. And I get that judging him based on those games I mentioned, that you just don't think he can pass because he had some errant throws against Texas. He didn't look confident. He was also, we've said this now 100 times, I think, playing against guys like Jahdae Barron and a couple corners who are coming back to this team that are going to be high NFL draft picks. So it's very, very tough. That's why at the end of the year, if Marcel Reed has had a good year passing the ball, I don't expect them against Texas to want to pass the ball that much. I think they want a balanced attack because Texas's secondary is going to be very good again. That's strategic. That's not because Marcel Reed is bad. That's just how you win football games. So it's like I'll get your response on this. Do you think? And we're going to reach out, but we'll go over a little bit to sum this up. Do you think this is a fair ranking overall?
I think preseason, I think this is an aptly fair rating as of right now because of what we outlined, where people are projecting him to be in this run-heavy offense, and I think that's kind of where they were leaning, where you have these healthy running backs. It's going to be a rush-centric offense, but could he make that jump into those top 20 quarterbacks this next season? Time will tell. So I think this is aptly rated for where he is right now.
Yeah. And I think the games that stood out for you, I think it's probably the same for me. I think that, and really that's why I believe in him, right? That's why I personally believe in him. If I didn't believe him, I'd say it. I'd say, look, Miles O'Neill has a higher ceiling. I don't believe that. I'm not in that universe yet. I have not seen Miles O'Neill, by the way, play enough football yet to make any assertion about his future. Like, I would have to see more of that. But it was against Auburn. I mean, that Auburn game, and I think a lot of others, guys, I think that I've talked to, that solidified it for me. That was the game where he had to put it on his back. He threw for almost 300 yards, completed, I think, like 22 of 31 passes or something like that. Had 3 touchdowns, was decisive, layered the ball. He had a pass to, I forget who it was. It was one of the bigger plays in the second half. But when you can layer a ball like that and you can drop it right in that guy's hands against coverage, you can play at this level. That's all I'm saying. So I saw enough. There were also drops in that game. There were bad play calls in that game That's why I don't blame Marcel Reed for this season, the way it ended. And I just don't understand the, like, again, I get the national ranking because they feel like all those guys are better prospects. And I think a lot of it, I see A&M fans in my comments and stuff, others that have said, like, man, he looks so thin. And maybe that's why. Maybe they just don't think he's big enough. I really don't know anymore. Maybe that's why.
Maybe the national media coverage, they don't know how to quantify it yet, but I think that they will definitely see it on the field this next season when A&M takes on UTSA to start the season in week 1.